All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'd like to welcome everyone. This meeting, I always say the co-op difference is that we are created by our members. We were created by our members and we're governed by our members. We are here to serve the members and therefore, members have a voice and that's what prompted this meeting. So I want to do some introductions. So first of all, to my left is John Wolfram. John is the founder of, is a principal of Catalyst Consulting. Catalyst Consulting provides consulting services to utilities, including electric co-ops, investor-owned municipals, and transmission developers in the areas of rates, regulatory strategy, and cost analysis. John has over 2 decades of experience, and we appreciate you coming, John. Second to my right over here is Blake Cleaving. Blake is a manager of member service solutions at Hoosier Energy. Hoosier Energy is our wholesale provider. So thanks, Blake, for coming. To my right, we got Matt Raver. Matt is our manager of accounting and finances. And then to my left at the end is Crystal Greathouse. Crystal is manager of member services and billing. So what prompted our meeting is we received a letter by 12 of our solar members asking some questions and pointing out some concerns. We thought the best way to handle this would be through a two-way communication meeting so that we could listen and resolve any concerns in a timely manner and prevent any misunderstandings. A few of the questions were very unclear, so we would have needed some clarification on some of those questions. We'll make some assumptions and try to answer those. Written responses alone, we figured could lead to more questions. And again, the two-way communication would allow us to get all those answered. And then also we wanted to invite 2 industry experts to lean on for questions and concerns. So again, our goal is to get our members' answers and concerns met, and that's what we will plan on doing today. So our agenda, I just went through introductions. We have some slides that we'll present. These slides kind of go through some theory and some just how we calculated and how these rates are calculated. We'll go through all the questions from the actual complaint and address those. And then if we would have had folks in the room, we would have had some further up questions. But again, we can always take those as they come up. So I'm going to hand it over to John to take us from here.
Thanks, Brett. So first off, a word about rooftop solar and the value stream associated with that generation resource. A solar array is a renewable generation resource. It's a source of power supply. It produces energy. That is its primary stream of value to the cooperative, is that it produces energy. It also does provide a small amount of generation capacity, which is the ability to produce a volume of power. And that is something that is credited by MISO, which is the Midwest Independent System Operator. That's the independent entity that operates the markets across the Midwest region in which Hoosier Energy participates. MISO credits that generation capacity with kind of a partial credit. So they give those resources 50% of their nameplate value in 3 of the seasons of the year, the spring, the summer, and the fall, and then a 5% capacity value in the winter. So the primary value associated with rooftop solar is in the area of energy, with a small amount related to generation capacity. So when a utility sells electric service to its customers, its members, the utility is really providing 4 different services. The first is the actual energy, which is the power the customer consumes. The others relate to non-energy related services, the generation capacity, which is basically you can think of that as power plants, the ability to produce that power, sources of supply. It also provides a service of transmission, which is moving energy across large distances from power plants to consumption centers. And it also provides service for distribution, which is the way that you move that energy to the end consumer at the lower voltage levels or more locally versus regionally. So those four services are all combined in what the electric utility provides to the consumer. When a member sells power back to the utility from its rooftop solar facilities, the member is really only providing one of those services back to the utility, and that is the energy. So the customer with solar is not providing any cost savings to the cooperative with respect to its transmission or its distribution systems. Those costs are untouched, are unaffected by rooftop solar at the residential level. Another way of looking at the value stream for rooftop solar is to look at more from a picture standpoint. If you look at all of the costs that the utility incurs, that's the first box on the left. All the costs can be assigned into different functions. One of the functions is power supply or purchased power. The cooperative here doesn't generate its own power. It buys all of its power from Hoosier Energy, the wholesale supplier. And it doesn't have its own transmission system. Hoosier has that also for moving that power across larger distances. The co-op, the retail co-op, provides distribution services for that power to its members. And so if you look and you break out the costs that the co-op incurs into those categories, you can more easily identify the cost savings that rooftop solar can provide to the co-op. Notice that that would not include any savings on the distribution side, on the distribution system. It will only provide savings for the purchase power costs. And even there, will only provide savings that relate to energy, because that, or the kilowatt hours, because that is what the rooftop solar offsets, those purchases of energy that the co-op has to make from Hoosier Energy. It doesn't offset any of the costs for the distribution system, that is the substations or the poles or the meters or the transformers or other facilities that are used to move power from Hoosier Energy down to the members of the cooperative. So this is more an illustrative way or a pictorial way of showing how that residential customers, what portion of the cost incurred by Decatur County REMC are actually going to be saved when rooftop solar is generating. Decatur County gets a bill from Hoosier Energy for its services, for the power supply, that is generation and transmission. On that bill, you have broken out different parts of the wholesale bill that the retail cooperative has to pay. A large component of that is energy, and that is what rooftop solar helps to offset. So it is true that there will be cost savings to the co-op from rooftop solar in the area of energy. But there's also a line on the Hoosier bill for member services, which are the costs for the administrative sort of costs that Hoosier provides to the co-op, and none of those costs are saved by having rooftop solar. There's also a section on the bill related to production demand costs, which are the cost, basically think of that as the cost for the power plants related to producing that energy. And those costs are billed in June through August and in December through February. Some of those costs could potentially be saved or reduced by rooftop solar, but I really think that is a relatively small amount, if any. And the other costs on the bill include transmission demand and substation or radio line costs, neither of which are affected by rooftop solar because they're not related to energy. They're related to the building of the transmission system and the building of substations and radio lines, all of which still has to happen, whether or not there is rooftop solar. So the question was asked, and we'll get into discussion here about how the rate, the purchase rate for the co-op members for distributed generation systems was developed. And the answer is that those rates were approved in May of 2014. They were based on actual values from the 2012 and 2013 time period, a 12-month period of actual energy and actual production demand and energy costs that were incurred in that period of time, broken out by season. And so we took the actual kilowatt hours in the three seasons, the summer, the winter, and the off-peak, which is the remaining 6 months of the year. We took those kilowatt hours and we looked at both the production demand on the Hoosier bill and the energy costs on the Hoosier bill, and used those to come up with a solar payback rate that was established in 2014. And you can see on the slide what those numbers are. They vary by season. That's exactly how, it's very simple math, how that rate was originally calculated. Now, there is also a tracker on the bills. The DG tracker is really just a pass through from the Hoosier tracker. So that doesn't influence the calculation of the solar payback whatsoever. At large, across the industry, there are many different ways, or at least a few different ways, whereby folks think you should calculate the payback for solar power, rooftop solar. The first theory would be one that ties back to Indiana's Rule 309, which was Senate Bill 309, was passed into law, which ultimately is going to phase out the net metering for investor-owned utilities. The new mechanism credits distributed generation owners at a rate that more closely is aligned with the wholesale costs that the co-op actually incurs from Hoosier Energy. And under the new rules, customers will continue to receive that retail credit for the power that you produce from rooftop solar, that you generate but don't consume, excess power. And that would be credited at the average marginal price of electricity with a 25% premium. In other words, 1.25 times the actual average marginal price cost of electricity, which for the co-op, based on the MISO pricing, because I said MISO operates the markets, they determine these prices on a real-time basis. And the average price for 2023 at the Indiana hub where this service is provided was 3.179 cents a kilowatt hour. So you would multiply that by 1.25 and come up with 3.973 cents a kilowatt hour as the price under this first theory. There are other theories. A second theory would be to just price that retail, that power at the average energy cost that's incurred by the G&T, or in this case, Hoosier Energy. For 2024, that would be 3.705 cents a kilowatt hour. Another way would be to just take the average wholesale energy cost, just take the wholesale cost and average it out over the period. Based on 2023, that would be 3.64424 cents a kilowatt hour. And then another way would be the way that it's currently done right now, which would be take the wholesale energy cost and the production demand related cost and come up with a weighted average by that for the seasonal, which we just talked about one or two slides ago that we developed in 2014. Those are other methods that are considered in the industry for solar power payback. And another one would be to take the wholesale energy cost and to take that production demand, but apply the weights that are used from MISO. MISO, in their planning year criteria, they develop a wind and solar capacity credit report. And in that report, they set the solar default seasonal capacity credits at 50% for all seasons except the winter, in which it's 5%. So if you apply those weights, you come up with a number that's about 4.3 cents a kilowatt hour as a credit for that rooftop solar. So these are different methods by which you could calculate the cost to be paid back for rooftop solar customers.
If we go through this one. Yep. So this slide here, we attempted to try to put some numbers. Well, we took, again, these different theories and put some numbers so that you could see the difference in an annual savings compared to what it is per kWh. So I'm going to start with the first one on the left, which is wholesale and energy, and then using, so all wholesale energy. So if you look at the Hoosier bill, all the energy for wholesale, and then plus the production demand by MISO's definition. So that's 50% of basically 50% of the production demand in all seasons, but winter would be 5%. So if you look at, and these numbers were derived, we took three actual accounts. One was a high user, one is a low user, and one is an average, and used their actuals to develop these costs. So what a member would expect to see back on average, 618.84 over a year, which again, that's at the 4.3 cents per kWh. If you move to our current rates, again, applied to the same accounts, it's $772.72 over the annual, which is, again, our rates are right about just shy of 5.5 cents on average. And then the IURC, which is Senate Bill 309, again, it's a, we're 41% above that, but that's 3.973 cents per kWh, which equals about $562. And then if you go to the avoided energy cost, which is again, the cost that we avoid from having to buy a kWh at Hoosier Energy, that's 3.7 cents and equates into about 524. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a range difference between our current rates and some of these other theories as an annual savings or an annual payback, and then compare it to the cost per kWh.
This here slide is I went out on the internet and tried to go to every REMC in Indiana and every IOU in Indiana and look up their rates that they paid for solar. Not everybody has everything posted on the internet. So I was not able to find them all, but you can see Decatur County is there on the left. The line is the median, and we are higher than the majority of the co-ops in Hoosier. The Wabash doesn't necessarily have the exact same profile as us, and they actually have different ways of calculating their rates. Some of them charge a significantly higher monthly fee and a minimum, and they have you pay the service charge no matter what, and the service charge is significantly higher than for regular residential. But in general, we pay currently higher than the state average across the board.
Now we're going to jump back into the actual questions, and some of these the presenter will probably mention that it may be a little unclear what exactly was being asked, but we're going to take some assumptions and try to answer them to the best of our ability.
So the first question was, how was the 2014 rate determined? I tried to answer that back on slide 8. I'll just repeat here that we took actual 2012, 2013 consumption values and applied the production related demand charge plus the energy charge from the Hoosier bill to those amounts on a seasonal basis to come up with that 2014 amount. The second question here is that are the co-op members who have solar represented in the cost of service studies since 2014? So the short answer is yes. The cost of service studies are full studies that include all of the customers of the cooperative, but that answer doesn't really affect the result of what these customers who have solar should be paid, because you don't need a cost of service study to determine how much a rooftop solar customer should be compensated for the power that they provide net of usage. That doesn't stem from a cost of service study. It's really an avoided cost analysis, and we talked about a few of the different methods, but really none of those require a cost of service study in order to calculate those amounts. And now diving a little deeper into the more technical questions. So the notifications set forth a few items, and the first of these is to say that in fact, we, the rooftop solar customers, do pay for transmission lines to our property in our $37 service fee every month. And so we highlight that because that is not correct. The $37 fee per month does not cover any transmission costs, and it doesn't cover any power supply costs. It only covers what we call customer related cost, which includes the cost of a meter, meter reading, billing, customer service. These are items that every customer, that the cooperative provides to every customer, regardless of how much power the customer uses. You need to have a meter, you need to get a bill, you need to have your bill processed, we need to have customer service representatives available to address billing questions and answer other concerns from membership. None of those relate to how much power you use or whether you supply power from rooftop solar. The only other piece that's built into that $37 is a small portion of the operations and maintenance expense associated with that share of maintenance for some distribution plant, but only that share that is not size related. In other words, the size invariant part of those costs that we determine in an industry standard method of calculating what those amounts are. So any parts of your bill that would change based on how much you use or how much you supply from rooftop solar is not included in that $37 monthly fee. So that's how that's handled. And then the rest of this section sets forth a claim that it's a 300% profit based on some of this math. And so that is also not true. That is not correct. I should say it's not a proper determination of profit because the co-op isn't profiting on this. Well, all that's happening here when rooftop solar generates excess power and sells it back to the co-op, or in other words, is compensated by the co-op for that. All that does is reduce the amount of total energy that the co-op has to purchase from Hoosier Energy. So there's no profit going on here. Item number 3, is the co-op a not-profit organization? The cooperative is a not-for-profit enterprise owned by the members. There is not a shareholder interest. There's not a profit. There are margins that are used to pay down debt and otherwise cover contingencies. But it is true that the cooperative is a not-for-profit enterprise. And yes, the 4th point, arguably a rhetorical question, aren't all rates supposed to be fair and equitable for all members? The answer is yes, the co-op aims to establish rates that are fair, just, and reasonable. Is it absolutely perfectly calculated for every member? No, because we group the members into rate classes, customers who use power the same way. So there's a set of residential customers who pay average rates based on average behavior for that particular class. The same is true for large commercial. The same is true for industrial. The same is true for street lighting. We group customers and we average within those classifications to come up with fair, just, and reasonable rates. So try to address some of these issues. Try to think of that $37 as covering the cost of being a customer related to primarily metering and billing, and a small portion of those costs that are related to the distribution system that are size invariant. No power supply costs, no transmission costs are built into that $37.
All right, so on this question for does Hoosier Energy sell or use the renewable energy credits, often referred to as RECs, in any way that are generated by our own personally owned equipment? The answer to this question from Hoosier Energy is no. We do not aggregate or sell or market any renewable energy credits from member consumer assets at the residential level. And then was Hoosier Energy involved in determining the 2014 Decatur County RMC solar rate? No, at Hoosier Energy, because of our G&T status, we have no retail rate making authority. So we did not intervene in any retail rate development at the distribution co-op level. Thank you, Brett.
One of the other questions in the letter was, does the cooperative not abide by our state's laws? So the answer there is that, of course, the co-op aims to comply with all applicable regulations and statutes from the state and for any other entities that have oversight over the co-op. The particular discussion around Indiana Senate Bill 309, I think we talked a little bit about earlier how you would apply the 1.25 multiplier to the marginal price of electricity paid by the electric supplier during the most recent calendar year. We determined that the current value pay more than this Senate bill requires to be paid. And that by this, we would be paying something like just about 4 cents, 3.973 cents per kilowatt hour rather than the 5.4 cents per kilowatt hour.
All right, John, thank you so much, everyone. I do have a couple follow-up questions just to clarify or maybe to put it a different way, because I think it's something that's been talked about in several different areas. Obviously, it came up in this letter too, John, but the way I've had it described is, Brett, you guys buy power from a rooftop member at average 5.5 cents. You take those electrons and you sell them for 10 cents, to my neighbor. That's this profit they're talking about. And John, the best way I've come up with to answer or to accurately answer to someone that's not used to how rate making work is our rate. So that 10 cents, what we charge our members is essentially recovering cost to run the entire business. Just a fraction of that is actually electrons, right? So that's the difference, is a retail customer that we are sending a bill to is paying for cost recovery of a lot more than just electrons. And so that's the difference between why we only pay 5.5 cents to for electrons from a solar site, as opposed to giving them, the 10 cents that we charge other members. That again, it comes up, John, I don't know if there's a way to describe that any more clearly, other than, again, we have to recover the cost to do the entire business. Whereas I always like to say it's like billing, right? So our solar members don't own billing. They don't own an accounting department. They don't own some of the things that are built into our rate specifically. Is there another way, John, of maybe describing that a little bit clearer in layman's terms? Or
Yeah, the way I would think about it would be like this. If I can go back maybe to slide 4, that would be a good start. So if you think about your bill, the retail bill includes all of the costs that the co-op has to incur in order to provide service. So the co-op, and that is largely driven by some 60-70% of that's going to come from Hoosier Energy, because we buy power supply and transmission services from Hoosier Energy. So the 4 things that the retail co-op is going to incur, those 4 costs you're going to incur are energy cost, and then you're going to pay for the facilities that are used to get that energy to your house or to your premise. So that's going to be generation capacity, which means power plants, transmission, which means transmission towers and lines, and distribution, which means substations and poles and lines down the street in your neighborhood, and transformers, all the things that move that power locally. The co-op has to pay for all of that. And if you think about it, which of those costs would be spared, would be saved, would be reduced if an individual consumer provides some of its own energy by rooftop solar? The answer is energy, because for every megawatt or kilowatt hour that the rooftop solar produces, you do not have to buy that. The co-op doesn't have to buy that from Hoosier Energy. So that's 1-to-1 savings on energy. But the co-op doesn't save a dime on distribution, because they still need substation poles, meters, transformers, all the things in your neighborhood that allow power to get moved around to the premises. That's all still needed. And transmission towers, which move power across the state of Indiana, or really across the whole region, is still needed. And the power plants that Hoosier Energy has and bills us for in part are still needed, because the solar power doesn't run at any time at night and doesn't run on cloudy days. And so as long as these rooftop solar customers still consume some power, all of those other costs that are incurred in order to provide that power are still needed. They are not avoided. So the only cost that really is avoided is the energy cost, and that is passed through back to the customer at the same rate at which the co-op would pay for that energy from Hoosier. So that's the way I look at it. You're still going to need all these other functions. The co-op's still going to have a meter and a bill. The transmission system is still going to have to be there. The thing that is avoided by the co-op, by you, by customers, members having rooftop solar, is the actual energy that rooftop solar provides. And that is not the whole 10 cents on the retail bill. If the retail bill is 10 cents, then about 3 cents, or whatever our number here that we said, is the energy. And all the rest of the bill relates to power plants and the transmission and the distribution and the meters and the billing and the administrative in general. All these other costs that are unchanged for the co-op, whether or not individual consumers have rooftop solar. So that's the way I would look at it.
another question, really good question I think we get a lot is, well, how did you guys come up with these rates? And I think John explained that you don't necessarily need a cost of service study to develop, or how they developed them in the past. And specifically, how did you calculate those? So you pick a test period. So in this case, it's, 2012, 2013, and you basically go to the wholesale bill. Again, that's the bill that we get from Hoosier Energy. There's a production demand charge on there. Again, we described what that is, but that is on the bill, and there's an energy charge on there. And there's a few other charges on there, but these are the two that we use. So you add up all the dollars in production demand, you add up all the dollars in energy, you combine those together, and you divide by the amount of kWh that we actually purchased. And you do this by season, and that's how you come up with what we paid back. So again, it's all of production demand, not just specifically what like MISO calls out, but it's all of it. And then energy. That's how they determined it back in 2014. And again, there's all different types of theories that you could use to get to this number. This is the one they chose in 2014. So I guess the other thing is there any other questions that Crystal specifically that you hear a lot, or Matt that you may hear, or anything else we'd like to, you two too, if there's anything that, while we got John and Blake both here, that we would want to ask to clarify?
And I was going to say the one comment as to why there's off-peak summer and winter. Power is more expensive in the summer and winter. But that's the wholesale power is more expensive in summer and winter.
Yep, the cost changes according to when your peaks are. So
When it's super hot and super cold, it costs more to get power.
My question is for John on the production demand piece. How common is that? It seems like the distribution co-op is being generous in allowing that in the calculation. Therefore, so the non-rooftop solar members, I'll call them, are actually paying a premium for the power. We could really be buying it cheaper from Hoosier Energy, but we're being, I would say, a little generous in the calculation. Is that a fair statement?
At the current rate, that is absolutely true, in my opinion, because that production, that demand value is baked into the calculation. And in real life, the co-op's not avoiding that cost from Hoosier Energy in its monthly bill by having rooftop solar customers provide energy. They're not avoiding production demand for the most part. So yes, I would agree with you on that.
So we're already paying a premium for the power that we're buying from the rooftop, number one. And number two, if we did do as suggested here and follow the Senate bill, then that would drop off. The production demand would drop off. And then the reimbursement would be the 3.9 cents. So that's what they're asking for. Right?
It would be 3.9, roughly 3.9 cents a kilowatt hour, which is lower than the current number, yes. And really, I think of it this way. I think of the demand costs. They're hard to get your head around, I think, a lot of the time. So I think of energy cost. If I liken the entire power system back to having a car, okay, and you have to put gas in the car, that's kind of like energy. If you drive a lot, you spend a lot on gas. If you use a lot of energy, you have a high bill for energy. The capacity, the demand piece on production is really driven by how big a power plant you need, how big a car you need. So I have a family of 6. We buy a van that costs more than a 2-door sedan, and I have to pay for the van. If, say, one of the people in my family graduates and moves out of the house, gets married, that doesn't mean I pay less for the van. I still have the van. I still have to pay for the van. And the same would be true. I might drive the solar panel in that instance, the rooftop solar is like somebody giving me a gas card, or someone saying, look, I'll tow your car for a little while, or you don't have to drive as far today because I have this for you. I'll provide some of that driving for you. But we still have the van. I still have to pay for the whole van. And that's what the production demand cost is, paying for those power plants. Transmission demand, paying for the size of how much transmission I need on the grid. That does not go away by me having to drive a little bit less. And that's really what the rooftop solar is doing, or any other self-supply is doing. That is a fixed cost, doesn't change. And so how you credit those customers would be just like me, credit somebody who says, you don't have to drive as much. I will pay less in gas, which is energy charge. It doesn't lower the fixed costs that the co-op has to incur in order to be able to serve everybody. So the analogy isn't perfect. It breaks down if you start looking at it too closely. So don't. I just mean in big picture, if you're having a hard time understanding what capacity means or demand means, it's size. How big a plant do I need? How big a transmission grid? How big a substation? And those things don't change based on self-supply like rooftop solar.
So Matt, too, I've also heard a lot of complaints about the variation in the seasons. And we all are familiar with that. We worked through that. And does it make sense at some point to average that and have a number? I think one of your slides, you did have a weighted average for over the whole first of the year, did you?
I believe we had.
I mean, does that make sense to do that? I mean, typically are folks reimbursing on a seasonal basis, or the co-ops you work with generally averaging that out over the 12 months?
So the Hoosier bill has different values in different seasons. And so I always recommend to co-ops that they match their retail charges with their wholesale charges to minimize risk of divergence. So if you average those out over the year, and then the co-op ends up having a lot of usage, say in an unusual month, like if it's a very hot April or a really cold November, then that could make your retail revenues and your wholesale bills mismatch. So I always recommend aligning the wholesale bill and the retail rates as closely together as possible. So that you don't have those mismatches.
As we've gone through some cost of service study, I think this is a good example of that. The simpler the bill is not the fairest. You know,
That's absolutely true.
we hear,
Because it's not it's a complex thing. And the wholesale bill, which is how the co-op gets billed for power supply, you don't get to control that here. You know, the Hoosier people decide what goes where on that bill. All you have to do is pay it and then design your retail rates, you meaning the co-op here, in a way that closely matches it for those line items on the bill.
The fairest way to do it would be to have seasonal rates and time of use rates. When the cost of power goes up, you pay more. But if you take, for instance, in January, when it was super, super cold, people's bills would have been way higher than what they were already high because it was super cold, but they would have been even higher because it would have.
well, we've talked many times about a 3 or 4 part residential
Yes.
rate, but
Fairest way, but it's also a lot.
It's more complicated and
But I think that this solar reimbursement's sort of on that same vein. You know, that's why it's not averaged together. That's why there are seasonal reimbursement rates, because that is the fairest way to do it.
And I think one other question that we get a lot that I think is a really good question is, well, what's the co-op stance on, you know, residential solar? And I think our stance is that we're here for the members. If the members want rooftop solar, well, we don't want to be a barrier. We want to be supportive. So, you know, that's a member decision, but the last thing we want to do is be a barrier to that. And so we have made quite a few updates to our application for interconnect. We do have to make sure that, you know, it is safe for our linemen, things like that. So there are some processes that we have to do. But by far, I would say, Crystal, we've streamlined that process. It's fairly easy for an interconnect with us. And again, our job is to serve the members. If it's not our decision of rooftop solar or not. So
And the solar tariff is on the website, correct?
absolutely.
And it has not changed for almost 10 years. So if someone wanted to know what the reimbursement rate is, they wouldn't necessarily have to call in. They could literally go to the website and find out exactly what they would be reimbursed.
Absolutely. All of our rates are on the website.
Okay, so you've got a kind of short portfolio or something. If someone says, hey, I want to put some solar into my house, what do I need to do? You've got something, here's a paper, here's outline. You can
We
give
do, yes.
Okay, so I can tell somebody if they're going to do that, to come in here and get that outline so they know what to put.
For that, or if they go to the website, there's a checklist.
Checklist on the web.
Actually steps them through exactly what they need to do in the process.
Okay.
It's relatively easy. I mean, we do have to go out and do our safety checks. We want to make sure that we don't want to put our guys in danger, you know, if we're feeding back, but I'd say it's relatively
I
streamlined.
mean, our solar application used to be 6 pages long
Mhm.
and it was a lot. And there was a lot of information that was not needed. So it's now a front and back.
There's an application that people have to put in order to put solar panels in to hook into the thing.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, and that's again, from a safety standpoint.
Got
Any other questions that you guys typically hear that while we have John and Blake here, we'd want to get answered?
The one you had on that paper, everybody, then, what was it, 7 or whatever, questions or whatever?
Yeah, we'll go through those with the echelon. We went through them already.
Okay, but that's okay. I know what's going on.
Yep. Anything else anybody has? Steve, any?
There is quite a few that are going to start putting solar on their houses and stuff.
Absolutely.
So you maybe get used to that.
Yeah, we have, I mean, if you look at the amount of solar that we have on rooftops, we are one of the top co-ops in Hoosier's system. And again, the last thing we want to do is be a barrier. We want to help.
And really, one of the best ways to do that is to set the compensation for that energy at the right amount, meaning at the avoided cost from the co-op, from what it pays to Hoosier. As soon as that cost is set at the right amount, the cooperative becomes indifferent. They don't have skin in the game. There's no over or under compensation we have to worry about getting from other members. If it's the actual cost, it's a pass through and the co-op becomes indifferent too. As many of them as we can get on, we should get on. It won't hurt. No one else is going to have to subsidize that effort. And so all of that sort of combative interests go away.
That might be a good question too, John, is, you know, on the flip side of this, we do have members that ask if you are overcompensating folks, what does that mean to an average member that doesn't have solar?
Yes, that is a fair question. And the answer will be, it depends. And I think that can come up every time you do a rate study and reset your rates. For the most part, with the levels of rooftop solar penetration that you have right now, I think those effects are very small. As that penetration grows, those effects will become more important, more sizable, more significant. And that's why you got to get that compensation to the actual avoided cost or whatever it is you're actually going to save on the Hoosier bill as close as possible, because then no matter how many people sign up, you're going to take away or diminish that subsidy issue for the rest of the membership.
Any other further questions? All right, well, we appreciate, again, the value of a co-op is there's no questions that can't be asked. And if you have further questions, please contact us. Thanks for watching and have a good day.